All right, and then now we're going to share the screen and bring on the presentation so that we can share with you everything that's needed here and get us going. Or we can put this here. Okay, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us this evening for our Dublin City Council Leaf Mold Project. And this is a pleasure for me to be working with you all this evening and through the next few weeks. And I know that a lot of you are all scheduled for a workshop coming up in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So I want to first thank Dublin City Council for funding the project. It's a great opportunity to do something positive. And I'm so happy you all have joined us on this journey to make some lovely weed-free compost for you to use within your neighborhood, within your community, and also within your homes. My name is Craig Benton, and I'm with Benton Ecological Solutions and Technology. I'm a subcontractor for the project, and I've been here in Ireland. As you can tell, I'm not from around here, but I have been in Ireland for 20 years, and I'm now a double agent because my grandparents were born here, and I'm married to a wonderful Irish woman who's keeping me very happy. She's lovely. Anyway, what we're going to cover tonight is the basic essentials of composting to give you sort of the crux of the whole situation with composting. We're going to look at how to make the leaf mold cages, which shouldn't be a problem because I'm going to do that with you. But we're going to cover, I think it's important, is where to put the cages. Very key. And I want you all to think about that between now and when I come out to visit you all, is to select the appropriate locations. And we're going to give you some tips on where to put those. We're going to talk about the do's and don'ts of making leaf mold. It's very simple, so this is not rocket science, and how the program works. We're going to talk about next steps and then open it up for question and answer at the end of the session. I expect this to not take very long, so we're going to go through this presentation. It'll take 20, 30 minutes, probably on the 30-minute side, and then we'll open it up for questions and make sure that we address any of the concerns you have. I'm going to start with the composting essentials, which forms the basis of making leaf mold. And I must say that making leaf mold is the easiest way of making compost. And we're going to review that very quickly. But composting in its most simple form is the farming of aerobic microbes to promote the decay of biodegradable materials in a stable humus-like substance called compost. All right, that's the most technical we're going to get tonight, folks. But let me break that down. Aerobic means in the presence of oxygen. So we want to keep things all so that they have oxygen there to promote the right kinds of microbes, which are little microscopic organisms and bigger because we have different insects and worms that are involved as well. And these are to promote the decay of biodegradable materials, which is something that was once alive. It could be plant or animal based, but we're going to talk about leaves here specifically. And it's to produce a lovely, stable, humus-like substance called compost, which is going to be better than anything you can buy at the garden center. Our compost is going to be a beautiful, beautiful product you can use. And I'm going to talk about this at the end, about how to use this compost to beautify and enhance the community that you live in. All right, so that's technical. Now we're going to get to the fun. The composting organisms that are a part of this whole process of converting dead materials like leaves into compost are shown in this slide here. These are called the decomposers. All these organisms have a role in chowing down or eating and decaying these organic residuals or the biodegradable materials, which can consist of anything that was once living. In this case, we're going to concentrate on leaves. So bacteria, mold, fungus, actinomycetes, the beetles and the earthworms and all these things in the blue are the organisms that feed on the organic materials. And then we see in the green above are these different organisms that actually feed on the organisms below. And the top of the chain, which are the predators of the compost pile, they're the ones that eat the critters below. It's kind of like the rabbits eat the grass and the foxes eat the rabbits, but sometimes we can't see these things. Now, this is an ecosystem, which is a community of life, okay, that are independent. And they do basically cycle through food through this ecosystem. It's a food chain. So the organic residuals feed the different organisms in blue, and they feed all the organisms above. Okay, so all these organisms are important in the breakdown of organic materials that we can convert into compost. Now, the really important thing here about composting is that these organisms are so essential in converting dead organic material into nutrients that then feed into the soil that support new life. Okay, so these decomposers are essential in providing nutrients that support new growth of plants that then support us as human beings in terms of creating oxygen we can breathe and in creating the food that we eat. Now, the four main organisms that are involved with composting are the bacteria, the actinomycetes, the mold and fungi, mainly fungus, and worms. These are the four organisms that are important. At first, the bacteria will colonize the pile. We can't see them, but we're going to utilize them to sort of get things going. And after that, then the actinomyces and fungi come in and start to consume the woody parts. And this is the leaves are high in carbon and are kind of woody, to break this down into a lovely leaf mold compost. And what we'll see over time, especially if we let the leaf mold piles sit, is that the worms will come up from the ground and they will start to finish off the compost. And as they digest things in the compost pile, they do pass things through their body. Will gets a little bit of worm poo. All right. And this worm poo not only helps to sort of provide nutrients that the plants like, but they also have a hormone that stimulates plant growth. And we'll talk about this at the end about in terms of how to use the compost, but it is a beautiful compost product that'll help you with your gardening, with your potted plants, with all kinds of great things that you want to grow in your neighborhood. The 5 essentials of composting, and this is the basis of what we're doing to create leaf mold, are getting a good balance of green and brown materials, and the particle size, which we're going to cover in detail in the following slides, and moisture, which is the 3rd essential, and aeration to keep things aerobic, and then they're basically creating sufficient critical mass, which is a sufficient volume of materials to sustain the composting process. So let's go through each of these individually so that we can take a look. Here we have the leaves. The leaves are a little high in carbon, and that's okay, which means that they'll just take a little longer to decompose. If we look at things like woody bits or logs in a forest, it's going to take many years to decompose because they're big and they have a lot of carbon, and it will take a lot of time to break them down. Leaves are thin and they're abundant, of course, in the forest floor. And as they fall to the ground, these decomposers that I showed you in the previous slides will act on these to break them down and release nutrients back into the soil that the plants can easily absorb and stimulate plant growth. What's important here with composting, especially with leaves and any other materials, as this is a picture of the composting particles. And what we're seeing is the film of moisture that surrounds each of the particles here, okay? And this is where the composting creatures live. Without moisture, there is no place for the composting organisms to live because composting happens from the outside in. Okay, so we need to make sure, and this is the most important thing, and I'm going to be saying this throughout, is that it is critical for the leaves to be wet. If they are not wet, there's no place for the composting organisms to live. And if they're dry, then we're not going to see any composting. Okay, so this is really, really important. Now, that's the quick, short, and sweet of the biology of composting and the essentials required to make compost. Now I'd like to focus on how to make the leaf cages. We're going to do this together, so there's not going to be any big deal, but I'm going to bring out a roll of 30-meter fencing. We're going to measure it out in 12-foot sections, and we'll cut them, and then I have this little device that helps to staple them together. So this is going to be very easy, and we will do this together. Again, there's 2 or more people are going to be needed for this task to measure and then to cut and then to staple them together. We'll be providing some gloves to protect your hands, of course. Okay. I have this little cutters that we can cut the wire. We won't need to do this because this takes too much time. I have this little stapler that staples the cages together. So that'll be easy. All right, so we're going to want to make sure that the cages are big enough because we want to be able to sustain and maintain the moisture in the pile. If the cages are too small, they're going to dry out. If they dry out, there isn't going to be any composting. All right, so we're going to give you cages that are 1.2 meters in diameter. And of course, what I want to say is you're not going to need these stakes that's shown here to keep the cages in place, right? Or keep them upright. Once we put the leaves in, they will hold the shape of the cage, right? And they will stay in place and not collapse. This is what we're going to do. Here is a group that has installed the cages, and I like to put them in pairs, and I'm going to explain why we do this. Here are the main considerations for where to place the leaf mold cages in your community. First of all, we want to pick a shady location near the trees where we have all the leaves. This cuts down on the work, and because it's in the shade, then we won't have the contents of the cages dry out. We're going to need to be near a source of water, whatever that may be. We're going to keep it away from ivy, bindweed, or briars because we don't want these invasive type of perennial weeds to invade the cages because they're full of goodies and nutrients that all plants like. And we want to try to keep them hidden and away from roads and avoid the fly tipping. Okay, so when I come out to your community, we're going to look at some various locations and pick the ones that will be safe for you all. Here is a picture in Castle Knock of some cages that are behind some bushes and well hidden. You can see the compost bins in the background, but the leaf mold cage in the foreground. Lovely place, no weeds nearby. Okay, so this is the type of locations that we're going to want, again, in the shade. If we can place it by a source of water, that is important, especially in the beginning. And I'll talk about this a little bit later, but we want to be close to water butt or water tap or a pond or creek so we can access water, especially when we're placing the leaves into the cage. They have to be wet. We also want to keep the cages away from weeds, especially ivy, briars, and bindweed. As we can see, these briars are jumping up onto the cage. They do like to climb, especially the bindweed and the briars, okay? And what they're going for is all the lovely nutrients inside. So we need to make sure that we site the cages away from obvious batches of these perennial weeds. If we're going to site the cages near trees, because the trees sometimes will grow roots up into the cage to suck all the lovely nutrients in there. And again, in a forest, the trees will spread the roots out to absorb all the nutrients from the leaves that are decomposing, to give it the nutrients it needs to regrow and to grow to be a big, beautiful tree. We can see here that we place the cardboard down underneath. Weed barrier does it, and there's other different things you can put down underneath. But here are some cages that are placed on top of a weed barrier, and they're ready to go. Now, it's important for us to place signs on the cages to help educate the community about what we are doing, and this helps prevent fly tipping, although some people ignore the signs, and we're going to have to be very careful to keep them hidden or keep them in areas like in a cul-de-sac or in areas that are behind bushes, so that we can kind of keep people from abusing the leaf cages. Here are the do's and don'ts of making leaf mold. It is the simplest way of making compost, good weed-free compost, but it just takes a little time. It'll take 1 year to make a lovely mulch, which we can apply to the surface of the soil to inhibit weed growth and to help hold moisture in the soil. Now, that wasn't a big deal this summer, but the summer passed. In 2022, we had a very dry stretch of weather. And so the mulch will help keep the moisture in the soil and keep the plants happy. If we allow the leaf mold to mature to 1.5 to 2 years, we get a beautiful, lovely weed-free compost. And when I come out to visit you, I'm going to show you these two things: the leaf mold mulch after a year, and I'll show you the leaf mold compost. The most important thing, the absolute most important thing, is that we need to fill the cages with wet leaves. Now, I'm a lazy gardener. I'm a lazy composter. It doesn't mean I'm not a good one. It might be that because I'm an old guy, that I'm a wise composter and a wise gardener. And so what I'm going to do is basically pick up the leaves after a heavy rain or a morning dew. And this allows the leaves to be wet, and I just throw them into the cage. As I said earlier, the place to put the cages are close to the trees where the leaves are falling, so we don't have to transport the leaves. We don't have to bag the leaves, okay? If we collect them when they're dry, we're going to need to water and mix them as shown in this picture. All right, so this is more work. But again, we can choose to do this, or we can choose to pick the leaves up when they're wet and put them in the cages. But if they're not wet, we will not make good compost. And this is essential. We're going to leave the cages open to the environment, so any rainfall that comes down will keep the cages nice and moist. We're going to fill the cages with wet leaves in the early autumn. After they settle, again, in October, we can fill the cages up. Over a few weeks' time, they will settle. We can top them up with more leaves at the end of the autumn leaf season, at the end of November and early December, and that's fine. We don't want to overfill the cages because the top layers can dry out, and if we get some nice windy weather in the winter, they're going to blow all over the place, and then that's just more work. So we're going to want to fill the cages up about 3 or 4 inches below the top of the cage. In the summer months, we're going to want to monitor the cages. Now, we don't have to turn them. All the work is in putting the wet leaves into the cage. But in summer months, we need to monitor the cages. This summer, we wouldn't have to do much because we got plenty of rain. The summer before, when we had a dry season, we're going to want to check the cages and the leaves on the top. If they're dry, we're going to want to get our watering can, which I'm going to give you, to water on the top, and use the pitchfork, which I'm also going to give you, to actually mix the moisture in and keep the leaves moist. Over time, the contents of the bin or cage will settle. We do not want to add leaves from the following season to the older leaf mold piles, because it's going to make it more difficult to harvest the compost the following year. It takes 2 years to make the compost. What we should do is start new piles or cages for the next season's leaves. This makes harvesting of the leaf mold from the older cages easier the following year. All right. After 1 year, the contents of the bin will settle, sometimes more than half. And this is when we can actually then, this is why I like to put 2 cages together, because then you can consolidate the 2 cages and free up a cage for next season's leaves. And if they run the program again, we'll give you extra cages to take care of the leaves in 2024. Now, some leaf mold can be ready to use after a year as a mulch, and I'll show you this. It's it's broken down a little bit. It's nice that you can use on the surface of the soil to keep the weeds down and to keep moisture in the soil. And as it breaks down further, it releases nutrients that the plants can absorb. After 2 years, your leaf mold compost should be finished and resemble a dark and crumbly compost. You'll find finished leaf mold in the middle of the pile, often under a dry layer of leaves on top. As you can see here around in this picture, there are leaves around the outside and on the top that are not as decomposed as what's found in the middle. At the 2-year point, you can then, as I said, sometimes you'll have to dig down just a few inches, 6 inches or more, because the leaves tend to dry out the top and they won't compost. But underneath, you're going to find this beautiful compost. All right. So we can screen it, or we can just fork off the leaves from the top and put it into a new or existing leaf mold bin or cage. Okay. And then we can harvest the compost underneath. Now, we just have to be patient, and we'll get this beautiful leaf mold compost that you can use around your neighborhood or community. Here's some beautiful stuff that we produced on Griffith Avenue in Dublin City here. Lovely, gorgeous stuff. After 2 years, they had, because they have so many trees on the avenue, we made lots of beautiful leaf mold. Okay, now, how do you use this stuff? After we've taken all the time to create this lovely leaf mold, how do we use it? After a year, or even after 2 years, you can use it as a mulch. And a mulch is anything you apply to the surface of the soil. It helps to protect the soil. It helps to inhibit weed growth, and it helps to maintain moisture in the soil, especially in the drier summer months. It can be used as a soil amendment or a soil additive. We can spread it 1, 2, 3 inches on top of a garden bed, use our spading fork and mix it into our garden beds, and it helps to sort of provide better soil structure. It helps to provide more nutrients. It helps to improve the soil. And then we can plant our flowers, our vegetables, our bushes, our trees into that soil. And there are so many things that compost can do, because as the compost breaks down by the organisms that live in the soil, again, there's an ecosystem, just like there's an ecosystem in the compost pile. It's a similar ecosystem in the soil. As they break down this compost, they are releasing nutrients that the plants can easily absorb. We can also use it as an ingredient in a potting or seed starting mix. Now, if you all are familiar with Raheny, which is a little village here on the north side of Dublin, they are using 1/3 leaf mold compost with 2/3 soil to produce a potting mix in which all those beautiful plants that are around that village are using to grow an absolutely gorgeous display of flowers. And they have them all on the buildings and in potted plants. It is absolutely spectacular. So they're using this as a way to grow gorgeous flowers. If we want to create a seed starting mix, we can use a screened leaf mold, but a lot of times the leaf mold after 2 years is ready to go without screening. And we can mix it half leaf mold, half sand, and we can create a lovely seed starting mix. So there's many ways to use this within your community. Now, how does the program work? This is an introduction to leaf molding and how to make lovely compost. We have you all scheduled. Oops, I made a little mistake here. It should be Tuesday, October 17th, but we have you all scheduled in these following days. If you're unsure of the slot that you're in, or you haven't scheduled your workshop, please contact Sinead Pierce with the Cabra office of Dublin City Council by email. All right, there's her email address, sinead.pierce@dublincity.ie, to make sure that you're scheduled in. I'm going to come out to visit you all, okay? We're going to conduct a 2-hour workshop with you and other community members to pick the appropriate locations. So you guys think about where you want to put these. I'm going to come out and make sure that we're going to have success, because we don't want to put these in an area where we're going to get a fly tipping or in a sunny location or too close to weeds. I'm going to help you build the cages and set them up. And of course, if we have enough time, because it doesn't take too much time to build the cages and look around, we're going to fill 1 or 2 of the cages with wet leaves. So if you can gather and bag the leaves ahead of time, we can then use them to fill the cages, making sure that we have some water at hand. I will provide guidance on how to manage the cages over time and answer any of your questions. Okay? So I'm going to help you get started. What you all will receive is up to 8 of the cages, and each of the cages will hold 20 to 30 bags of leaves. We're going to give you a beautiful German-made pitchfork, a watering can, to make sure that you are successful in managing the cages and have the right tools. I'm also going to give you a sign to put on the cages to discourage misuse and fly tipping. Now, that's no guarantee, but if we put the cages in kind of a hidden location where people can watch over them and people can't see them, then it's most likely that we're not going to get any misuse or abuse of the cages. This is a sign that's going to be provided for you in English and Irish, of course. All right, so those can be provided for you all. And I'm going to open it up to questions that you have right at the moment. Okay, folks, any questions whatsoever? Now is the time to jump in.
I have a question
Yes.
about kind of when people think about composting, or when some people think about composting, they associate composting with smells, perhaps rats.
Yes.
And like, I know, because I have a compost bin in my front garden, and I collect the streets leaves in my front garden, and I just leave them there. I don't have a cage. I've just let them settle and become, like, biodegrade into my front garden as a way of preventing people from throwing them into their black bin. But there's been comments about potentials of rats. How do you, like, is there any truth to that? Obviously with food it's totally different from leaves, but there's still that kind of negative association with composting at times. Yeah, I suppose, have you come up against that when it comes to the leaf mold cages? Have there been questions about rats or smells?
Absolutely. This is the perfect question. Now, first of all, odors. There'll be none. Absolutely zero. We only get odors when we're trying to do like food waste, where it gets all soupy and goopy and stinky and it goes anaerobic. So leaves will not smell whatsoever. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, rats. There is nothing in the leaf pile that the rats like to eat. So there is not going to be any issue with rats coming in there to feast on the leaf mold. Now, in the wintertime, the rats do like to find nice, dry, and cozy places to nest and to do their thing, if you know what I'm saying. But if the leaves are nice and moist, then the rats don't like it. Okay. So we are going to create a situation where we're not going to give the rats an opportunity. They're going to just look at it, take a sniff, and check it out. And they're going to say, nope, I'm going to find a better place. There's no food for me. There's no dry, lovely little home for me. So rats are not going to be an issue either. All right. All right. Now, in terms of the leaves, what I want to say is this. Leaves are gardener's gold. This is the most precious resource that gardeners have because you can make a mulch out of leaves. You can make compost out of leaves by mixing it with things like grass cuttings or other materials from the garden. You can make leaf mold out of it if you have the patience to wait 2 years. And also, I like to sort of accumulate leaves to create a bedding for a wormery where I then can put my food scraps into a sealed box that keeps the rats out and produces a beautiful worm dew compost. And this worm dew compost is probably a little better than a leaf mold because it not only has all the nutrients in it, but it also has hormone in it that stimulates plant growth. But trust me, when I show you the stuff that you can make from the leaves, you guys are going to just love it because it's beautiful stuff and it's better than anything you can buy at the garden shop. All right. So we're going to go over that when I come and visit you. I hope that answered your question, Katrina.
Yes, thank you very much, Craig.
Very good. Any other
Craig,
questions? Pipe up.
Craig, do some leaves take longer than others, do they, to decompose?
Okay, that's an excellent question. Very good question here. Now, some of the leaves that are out there, like laurel leaves or rhododendron leaves, that are kind of waxy, they don't break down that well. So what we want to do, a few of them in a mix of everything else, no big deal. But what we want are the basic deciduous leaves from deciduous trees, the oak, the ash, the beech, all these trees that are here in Ireland, the gristolania, the laurels, the rhododendrons, those take a lot of time to break down. Now, if they're probably 5 or 10% of the mix, I'm not going to worry too much as long as we keep it moist. The thing is, when the leaves are dry, they're not going to compost. So the key thing here is that we want to make sure that the leaves are wet when they go into the cages. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks.
Very good. All right. Any other questions? I like it. Keep them coming.
Yeah, hiya, it's Therese here, Craig. I just wanted to know how much mulch we would get out of 8 cages full of leaves. My sense of it is it'll rot down to hardly anything.
Yes. All right. So after a year, the cages will settle in half. So you'll get, if you use 8 cages, you'll get 4 cages of leaf mold mulch. After 2 years, it'll actually settle even more. So you might get 2 to 3 cages of beautiful compost. All right. Okay. All right. So it's not going to be a huge amount of stuff. And if you live in a community and people are gardeners and they understand the value of compost, you won't be able to make enough. Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? You guys are awesome. Any other questions from you all?
Yeah, I had a quick question, which is about leaves from things other than trees, like leaves from other plants or even vegetable leaves, like raw vegetable leaves from vegetable plants. Do they work in this system or not?
Okay. If you add something like, let's say you have your leaves and you wanted to add grass cuttings later. That's just if you, as long as you mix them in with the leaves, it'll help speed the process up. What's lacking with the leaves is a source of nitrogen. Now, when you leave the leaves on their own, they're going to have to draw the nitrogen from the air. Okay, and this is why it takes so long. But if you actually mix in garden materials, weeds or flowers or even grass cuttings, as long as you mix them with the leaves and there's sufficient moisture, it's only going to speed up the process. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, one of the things that I like to suggest to people is that sometimes you can actually stash your leaves right now, build up your stock of leaves, and then the following spring and summer, you have something to mix in with the grass cuttings, because the grass cuttings don't compost well on their own. Or if you want to compost food, you've got something to balance the food with. So there are ways. And if this is something you want to do, when I come out to visit with you all, I'll teach you how to do that so you make it a little faster. Okay?
Okay.
Great. That's perfect. Thank you.
Question. I appreciate that question. Any other questions from folks?
All right, Craig, just in the estate I'm in, there are some skeptics, to say, in relation to the project. And for instance, I got a response from one that, while I appreciate the interest been shown in this by some residents of our estate, I don't feel it's suitable for our estate in that it will become a dumping ground, and And then it said, I trust it will not be left to a few residents to make sure that a decision like this is made without agreement by all residents in the estate. You get some people who just don't understand and appreciate the benefits, etc. And how do you might you might encounter some of that when you come to us on Thursday. But
I think actually,
I'm not sure, is that a kind of a normal reaction from
No.
people?
You are spot on. You are absolutely raising probably the most important question here. And here's the thing that I would say. It's important to educate everybody in the community so that the cages do not get abused. What we might do is put a lid on the cages so no one can put stuff into it. Now we might put a top on it and attach cable ties so that you can actually then take the cable ties off and then get in there and moisten it and manage it. But what we most certainly want to do is, this is why it's so important to site the cages and put the cages in an appropriate location. We don't want it close to a road. We don't want it really visible. We're going to want to sort of, sometimes in some communities, what we'll do is actually put some of the cages in people's homes if they're willing to have them, which then also discourages people from abusing it. And then you have somebody taking responsibility for them. But I think this is really very important. So one is that a lot of these community groups have WhatsApp groups, or they have a web page, or they have some way of communicating. Or even if they have to print out a little flyer and put it in people's mailboxes, it's going to be critical for you to communicate this so that the cages do not get abused. Because now on the project we started a few years ago on Griffith Avenue, after the cages settled after a year, there was a landscaper that came along and dumped stuff on top, branches and stalks and all these things that don't break down easily, as a way to avoid having to pay to get rid of his garden waste. Now we're having to clean those up. Not a pretty sight. But underneath all that, there was some beautiful compost. There was some beautiful leaf mold even after a year. So, Michael, what we're going to do is, when I come to visit with you, and it might be a good opportunity to actually bring some of those people that are a little more apprehensive about the program, to bring them out so that we can talk to them and educate them and try to figure out what's the best place to put these. Why is it so beneficial for you all? Because again, This is going to be your program. This is going to be something you do to create this beautiful compost. And I'll show you what you can make out of it. And once people see that, they're going to say, lovely, I want that for my garden. I want this for our community. I want this for our flower beds. I want this for our potted plants. So education is going to be the key. And I'm so glad you brought this question up because it's so important that we set this up properly and we have people taking responsibility so we can monitor, we can manage them to produce the compost that we can all enjoy and use to help us beautify our landscape. Is that okay?
Thank you very much. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
That excellent question. I really appreciate that. That is spot on. All right. Anyone else? I heard somebody else piping up here. It was Catherine. Did you have anything
No,
else?
no.
Okay.
I'm
All
finished.
right.
Thanks very much. We look forward to seeing you on Sunday. Then,
These-
Craig, we'll see you on
Yes.
Sunday.
Oh, good. Perfect. You
Yeah.
guys are at 12:30, aren't you?
Yes, we are indeed. Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
good.
So there's
Right.
Lisa, there's a few of us on the call here, so we're looking forward to meeting you on Sunday.
Very good. No, it's be my pleasure to help you and to make sure this works. So what we're going to do is try to think about all these things to make sure we got the right place, that we have everybody is on board, and that we put the leaves in when they're wet so we will actually make great compost. Now I see Bradley and Kieran. Do you guys have any questions, Lisa and your lovely partner? Do you guys have any questions of any kind at this point?
Yeah, Craig, it's Kieran.
Very good, Kieran.
Yeah, I just have a question. Can a cage be placed on a footpath rather than on a on soil? Because you mentioned earlier about worms coming up,
Yep.
and if it's on a footpath, obviously worms can't get up. So can it be placed on a footpath?
You'd be surprised. The worms will find their way. Look, if it is a footpath that's not being used and it's in a shady location, I'll say yes. So it's
Okay.
not super ideal, but it will work. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're
yeah.
going to come and take a look and evaluate things. And again, at the end of the day, it's going to be your choice. I'm going to say, yeah, that looks good, or that's not ideal, but it's your community. And what I like to tell people when I work with them is I'll give you options. I'll give you ideas, and it's up to you then to pick the right situation for yourselves. All right.
Thank you. That's great. Thanks.
There are some things which I will actually say, no, that's not a good idea, but then you make the decision. Is that okay?
Perfect. Thanks, Craig. Thank you.
Anyone else? Everyone happy? All right. Now look, this is not complicated. It's not difficult. And this is why I want to come out and meet with you all to help you get this set up properly and to give you the instructions you need. I will bring out the fact sheet so you have a little paperwork it's a double-sided piece of paper that helps you give all the tips and tricks on how to do this. And then we're available afterwards to answer any questions or troubleshoot any problems. But what I want to say is most important. The council's giving you all a gift. And when we set these things up, we want to make sure that you feel a sense of ownership and responsibility. This is going to be your program. All right. Don't expect the council to manage this for you. They're not. It is basically, once you sort of make the compost, as I said earlier, you won't be able to make enough of it because it's such beautiful stuff and you get that benefit. All right. And at the same time, you're helping the environment. You're helping become the solution to the global warming situation and our waste situation. It is the true definition of a circular economy where we're keeping these resources within the community and reuse them to enhance our landscape. All right. So that's the most important thing. Is that okay? Thumbs up. Thumbs up. You guys are awesome. All right. I look forward to seeing everybody unless there's another question. Yes. Michael Flynn, is there a question over there? All good? Kevin?
All good, yeah, thank you.
Therese, everybody all good? All right. Well, listen, God bless you all. And I can't wait to see you. And I look forward to being with you to set this up and make it successful. Okay?
Right.
Thank
Thanks
you,
very
Craig.
much.
Thanks very much,
Thank you,
Craig.
Craig.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig.
Cheers. All right. Good night.
Bye.
Righto. Bye-bye.